Hey folks, and welcome to another video. In this one, I'm going to talk about how to push your Exsanguinate Reap Miner Trickster into endgame. This is something I'm definitely going to get asked, so I'd rather give it to you early. Some of you are going to be ready to do some of these things on day 2. In this video, I'm going to cover a tree transition I do once I start doing Ubers away from one step ahead and into Spellbreaker. We're going to discuss how mine overthrow can happen in this particular build for both Reap and Exsanguinate. I'm going to talk about freeze and how to get more of it. I'm going to go over gear upgrade priorities. I'm going to go over some high budget nice to haves, and I'm going to do this in the context of the more end game and super late end game POBs that are now in the original build guide. And as a quick aside, I'm always going to keep those POBs up to date. I'm not going to put any POBs in this video because managing POBs across multiple videos is a recipe for me forgetting to update one and somebody getting old information. I also did a video a few months ago on mine breakpoints, and I've gotten a bunch of questions about how it applies to this build, so I'm going to answer those really quickly. First, the cast time isn't crazy high on Reap and Exsanguinate, and if you're using Minefield, you get an additional 4 mines. So you're looking at a cap of 23, which early game actually makes it very difficult to overthrow, especially if you're moving around. However, for singles target situations, if you have a lot of mine throwing speed investment and a bunch of expert sabotage, you're going to overthrow. Oh, let me explain why. Expert sabotage is numerically the strongest pound for pound notable that you can get on a cluster jewel. It gives you a 10% additional chance to proc a mine after it detonates, but you have to pay a rearming delay, and I'll show you what that looks like here. Now you can stack these. I almost always use 1 or 2 of these clusters because they're so strong, but more than that, you're going to run into issues where you can't throw a mine or a bunch get overwritten, which makes expert sabotage actually reduce your DPS instead of the 10% added that you should be getting. Just keep an eye on the number at the top. If it's over 20 a lot, you're probably overthrowing, because it's really hard to see on the ground. Here, I'm going to circle what one looks like. You'll see these mines have just shells sitting on the ground. That's what an overwritten mine looks like, and it did 0 damage. The next thing I want to bring up is freeze. Now, freeze is a super important part of this build. It's central to basically everything, and understanding how freeze works is important. Now, in my early game POBs, I don't have Winter's Embrace allocated, but if you are struggling with freeze, you should path up and take this wheel. I have a couple paragraphs on why and how that works in the League Start POB, but the gist is freeze doesn't work like other things that have increased effect based on ailment effect. Instead, what you want is duration. Freeze operates on duration. In order to get a minimum freeze on something, you have to deal 5% of its health pool. With 100% increased freeze duration or ailment duration, you only have to deal 2.5% of its health pool. So this effectively doubles your damage with respect to the amount of freeze you're able to get. Keep that in mind if you're struggling with freeze. There are notes in the POB. Check it out. The next thing I want to cover is an ascendancy adjustment that I make once I start really bossing, and that is to move away from one step ahead and take Spellbreaker. Now, if you're living in boss fights, Ubers in particular, suppression is by far the best form of defense that you have in these fights. Now, it might not seem like much, but 10% additional damage suppressed if you're already at 56% between the mastery and the suppress wheel is actually almost 23% less damage taken. And in a fight like Uber Shaper where everything is a spell, that's a lot. And the hits in these fights tend to come more infrequently, which means the number of times you have full energy shield is actually quite high. This is why it's okay to accidentally catch a stray Shaper Ball or something. And you can improve this with Wicked Ward, but I tend to not need to go that far. Okay, let's talk about how we're going to prioritize our gear upgrades. The first thing, if you don't have it yet, is a Heat Shiver. This is a massive improvement in your damage as long as you're freezing enemies, which I talked about some earlier. The next highest priority by far is a new weapon. In fact, I would probably upgrade my weapon a few times before touching anything else on this list. And this includes your offhand, so your shield too, or if you're dual wielding. Next on the list is your amulet. A +2 gems and crit multi amulet is worth about what a +3 gems amulet is with respect to damage. You don't get the RMR, but you can get other stats like resistances, more mine throwing speed, and it has a really nice side benefit of alleviating the need to have 2% CDR because it'll level up your gems that are giving you automation and detonate mines. The next thing from a damage perspective I would upgrade is I'd start looking for a +2 gems chest. Now, if you're using Exsanguinate, this is a duration tag. If you're using Reap, it's going to be duration and AoE. This is a massive power boost early on and something I'll even take a scuffed chest usually to push content higher, but that might not be for everyone. And lastly, gloves. Dropping the Hrimsorrow for a pair of Betrayal gloves with the implicit is great. Now, you don't have to be 100% cold conversion. Recognize that you are going to lose some damage if you don't, but doing a 50% pair of gloves and 40% from the tree is fine until you can upgrade to 100 a little later, provided you're still doing enough damage, obviously. Now, the reason I use gloves is because I can get the temple mod, and a good pair of gloves can reduce resistance pressure elsewhere in the build. Now, as far as crafting your own gear, that is one of my favorite things to do. I craft every league. And I'm going to link some videos in the description below that show you how to make a bunch of these things I'm talking about. Videos for crafting weapons. You'll find a video that has how I craft my temple mod gloves every league. You'll find a video on how to craft +2 gems crit multi-amulets. And also keep in mind, you're not bound to use a wand or a scepter or a rune dagger. You can use any caster weapon you want. All right, last thing for this video are some of the high budget nice to haves. The first thing is a Balance of Terror. Now these are awesome. I've used them for many leagues, and it will give you up to 40% fizz gained as extra of a random element. This is a massive amount of damage for a physical spell build. You should absolutely use this if you can. They're probably going to be expensive, especially with the nerfs to Sanctum, reducing the number of people running Sanctum, but if you can find one, you should get it. The next is a Storm Shroud. Now I use a Storm Shroud except in self-chill builds almost exclusively. It's the best way, in my opinion, to get ailment immunity. Now these are always really expensive on league start. You might want to wait a few days if you need to build up more currency, but the quality of life and comfort of being ailment immune cannot be overstated. Next is a Corrupted Kikizaru. These are so common that there are going to be tons of good corruptions laying about. My preference is for Hatred Effect, or you could get something like Ignite Immunity or Poison Immunity before you get ailment immunity with Storm Shroud. Or you might like more quality of life type things like Elemental Res. Next on the high budget is Forbidden Flame and Flesh Jewels. Now there are a few good options for offense. My favorite is Ambush and Assassinate. This is generally the one I play on Trickster every league. Harness of Void is also amazing. Opportunistic is great for bossing and single target and defense in Uber fights. And if you're looking for a pure defensive setup, Born in the Shadows is probably the best option. The next thing on my list is a Bottle of Faith. This one's a layup. It's a lot of additional damage. You can also get increased effect RMR clusters. These usually cost a fair amount to make, but it will allow you to acquire Herald of Purity more easily, which is another big chunk of damage. As soon as you can, you should also try and find a high double damage Lethal Pride. You can get Gain Fizz as extra fire, you can get life regen, you can get a lot of nice quality of life type things on a Lethal Pride, and most importantly, it gives you a ton of strength, which makes gearing up a strength starved character quite a bit easier. On the right side, we just don't have that much access to strength. Next is a Rational Doctrine. This comes from Uber Cortex, and it is amazing if you can make the attribute requirements work. A Dragon Fang is also probably worth it if you can find one cheap enough. Either Reap or Exsanguinate, both are good. If you're going to just do pure bossing, I would probably look for Reap, but my expectation is that both of these are going to be very expensive through the first several days. Now the best in slot amulet is going to be a focused amulet, a +401, probably with mind throwing speed or crit multi. I have a video on how to craft these in my catalog. I'll link that in the description below as well, but this is also a very high budget item and not until later in the game. And then lastly, I'm going to play this build as a self-chill setup. I have a POB in the League Start Guide so you can see sort of where I'm headed with this, but it's going to require a Mage Blood and a lot of investment to craft things like trigger weapons. All right, that's all I've got. I'm going to go do maybe a little bit of practice and probably a lot of work so that I can safely no-life a League Start. Last, I want to also shout out Aeroplane. He's doing a very similar build, and he's just a really quality dude and a really good content creator. You should check him out. I'm going to link him below. I'm sure he's going to have a lot of interesting things to say about this build too. We've interacted a few times over the years in random temp leagues and things, and he's just a super nice guy. All right, that's all I've got for now. I will catch you all in the next video. Take care.